Welcome to the UP Notable Books Club, brought to you by the Upper Peninsula Publisher and Authors Association. Bill Sproule is a professor emeritus, Michigan Technological University, Houghton, Michigan, where he taught transportation engineering, public transit, airport planning, and hockey history. He is a member of several associations, including the Historical Society of Michigan and the Upper Peninsula Publisher and Author Association. He's a co-author of the Airport Textbook, Planning and Design of Airports, author of several conference proceedings on automated people mover systems, and author of 3 local books, Copper County Streetcars, Houghton, The Birthplace of Professional Hockey, and his newest book, Michigan Tech Hockey, 100 Years of Memories.
It is my pleasure to welcome William. He's going to be talking to us about his book, Houghton, The Birthplace of Professional Hockey. And before I turn it over to him, just 2 announcements from me. Next month, we will be doing In the Night of Memory, and we will be meeting on, I've got it right here on my paper, January 13th. So this one is a novel, and we've got a couple copies here at the library, and your libraries may have it too. So please, check it out soon and start reading.
I read it, and it's very good.
Good. I haven't read it yet, so that is good news, Mary. So that coming up in January, and then again, if any of you still need the Women of the Copper Country, I'm happy to send you a copy free of charge. You get the copy, you get a bookmark, you get the reader's guide, free postage. It'll come right to you from our library. I've got 30 copies to dispense, and you are my people. I would like you guys to have them because that's going to be our May author, and she'll be talking about the book in May. All right. Well, William got on nice and early, and we did a test. Everything seems to be working. So here he says his writing name is William, but we can call him Bill. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you. I'll just get my slides going here. Well, we had it going. Just a sec here. Well,
yeah, it'll just take a second.
something happened to it on our stuff here. Just get out and try it again here.
Sure. Megan, I just got your message in the chat. I will definitely send you a copy because it's a good book if you haven't read it yet. So The Women of the Copper Country, that's going to be coming out to Megan and anybody else who writes me that they want one. And yeah.
I should note that Linda Lagarde is going to be appearing in Marquette for our UPPAA annual convention in the spring.
Oh,
June 4th.
Great. Yeah. And if anybody's in the Crystal Falls area, while William's trying to screen share, this Saturday we have our Crystal Christmas. We have 5 authors coming to sell books. So the weather looks like it's going to be just terrible. I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm hopeful that it will work. So any luck there, William?
We're getting there.
We're getting there. Okay, good. I was just checking to see if I can share. Looks like I can share. I don't want to share, but I'm going to. Yeah, we have an event in the morning. We've got a woman coming. She's a first grade teacher. She's going to be reading her children's book and we'll do a little craft with the kids. But then at 2 o'clock on Saturday at our library, 5 authors are supposed to come, and we'll see what happens. So I know Mary's not too far away. She might want to come and buy some Christmas presents. Okay. All right, William.
Oh, that looks great.
There we go.
Okay, we're all set, I think.
Yep.
Thank you very much, everyone. Mine is a little garbled. Can you hear me well, or?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's fine. Well, it's fun to be part of the UP Notable Book Series. When I was approached last spring, I just thought, well, December's a long way away, and but anyways, here we are. I guess to give you a background myself, I'm originally from Sault Ste. Marie, Canada, and graduated from Michigan Tech in 1970. Went away earned a master's degree from University of Toronto and a PhD from Michigan State. About 25 years, I returned to Michigan Tech as a professor or faculty member in civil environmental engineering. And probably, early 2000s, I offered to teach a course in hockey history and culture. And that's really kind of got me into a whole new research area. I was coaching hockey at the time, and a colleague said, well, this new course they had at Michigan Tech called Perspectives on Inquiry, it kind of replaced freshman English. And they laid out a format of basically how writing papers, presenting papers, and critical thinking. And they called on senior faculty around the campus to teach these courses. And we were to develop a question or a theme to it. There'd be faculty members did one on the Vietnam War, the John Wayne movies. I did one on hockey history and culture. And my question laid for the students was, is there such thing as hockey culture? And there is. But that's what started me as I started to gather materials, and I was drawing on my youth, and I'd followed hockey for years. I came across a clipping that said Houghton was the birthplace of professional hockey. Well, as a Canadian, there was a lot of skepticism. I couldn't believe it. So I spent quite a bit of time in the archives, in the library, to find this story, and now joined actually a Society of International Hockey Researchers to verify the story. So this book project that the Houghton Birthplace of Professional Hockey started to think about it many years ago, and then started to put together materials, but it's one of those projects that kept getting put to the side until shortly after I retired, it came out. I think it was 2019 it actually hit the streets. So now, when one thinks of professional hockey, many will just think of the National Hockey League and the Stanley Cup. That's what probably, when people think of professional hockey, that's what they think of. Well, we're going to trace a couple things. We're going to trace the birth of professional hockey, and we'll tie in a little bit on the Stanley Cup and the NHL. So for those who aren't familiar with hockey, you'll walk away with quite a bit of information tonight. So, well, there's always a debate, when and where did hockey begin? Some think it was in Europe, some say Halifax. There's always a debate. And I guess really you almost have to define what hockey is. Well, a group of the Society for International Hockey Research did a few years ago to try and decide where hockey actually began. And this gentleman here, James Creighton, is attributed to be the father of hockey. He was born and raised in Halifax, civil engineer. I was a civil engineer. He moved to Montreal and worked on some civil projects and in the Montreal area, and he began to study law at McGill University. Now, he was a skating instructor, and I think he probably played a bit of what we call shinny hockey or pond hockey in Halifax. So he brought that knowledge and joined the Victoria Skating Club in Montreal as a skating instructor. But because he played some hockey, he brought together a group of members of the club and some McGill University students and showed them the basics of hockey. Then they decided, let's split ourselves into two teams and do a demonstration of a hockey game. So, as I said, the first official hockey game was held on March 3rd, 1875 at the Victoria Skating Rink. And then shortly after that, he published a set of rules. It was covered in the press. He explained the games to the newspapers, and he published a set of rules, which really were the first set of rules for hockey. Now, this is just an artist's painting of an early hockey game at the Victoria Skating Rink. The rules were quite different than they are today. And the book, the Houghton book, Birthplace book, gets into the rules of the time. Well, hockey grew very quickly in the Montreal area and in Quebec City, in that part of Canada. The game was primarily for men and the upper class, and primarily was athletic clubs who would compete against each other. And then several leagues and tournaments took place in the Montreal, Quebec City area. McGill University soon formed a team, and they were participating in these tournaments. There was Winter Carnival in Montreal, and there was a hockey tournament as part of the celebrations. Now, Creighton actually graduated in law from McGill University, and he accepted a position in Ottawa with the civil service. So he moved to Ottawa. So Ottawa was just starting to, hockey was just starting to move into Ottawa area too. So he joined an athletic club in Ottawa, but then he also formed was part of a hockey team of members of parliament, other civil servants, and they would play a series of exhibition games. The team was called the Ottawa Rideau Rebels. Now, this person with the ball cap and the light shirt, that is Creighton. Now, the interesting thing on this is that there were two members. Their father was the Governor General of Canada. This fella here is Arthur Stanley, and this fella here is Edward Stanley. The reason they got the name Rideau is they played exhibition games at a rink on Rideau Hall, which was the Governor General's official residence in Ottawa. And then they played in a couple of and then they would host other teams from Ontario. The Governor General would host them. So it'd be, and then they also traveled. They would use the Governor General's rail cars and travel to other parts of Ontario. So that's the famous Rideau Rebels. Well, you can almost start to guess who his father was, who the father was now. It was Sir Frederick Arthur Stanley. He was the Governor General. He's from England. And the Governor General in Canada is more of a ceremonial job. But he's appointed by Queen Victoria. But when he came to Canada, he'd never seen hockey before. But he was fascinated by this game. And his two sons and actually a daughter played hockey in the Ottawa area. He really loved the game. He was fascinated by it. And so he really started to think, was there something I can do to capture this interest in hockey in Canada? And so at a banquet in Ottawa in March of 1892, to celebrate Ottawa's victories for the season, he donated a hockey trophy to be awarded to the best amateur team in Canada. Well, many will probably know this. The trophy is called the Dominion Hockey Challenge Cup, and it's been nicknamed the Stanley Cup because Lord Stanley's name is on the cup, but you'll also see on the bowl it's Dominion Hockey Challenge Cup. So they appointed trustees, and it was a challenge trophy. So teams could challenge for the trophy several times during the year. And the trustees had a set of rules for the challenge. And there's more in the Houghton book about the rules and the challenge and so on. So the first to be awarded the cup was the Montreal Amateur Athletic Association, a men's club in the Montreal area. So it is now there's stories and many stories about Stanley Cup since. Books and books have been written about this particular trophy. But the original one is this bowl. Now, as probably everybody in this audience knows where Canada is, but basically it was really Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City, and then it got to Toronto. And then as the railroads were built across Canada, the game started to be picked up by these small communities and on ponds as railroad workers would move across the country, hockey kind of spread across the country. And it really became a game not just for the upper class, but the working class man would play hockey too. Now, there were also at the time, there are a number of organizations or provincial associations set up that would make sure that the game remained as an amateur sport. And one of the organizations, very powerful, was the Ontario Hockey Association. And that really it was Arthur Stanley, Lord Stanley's son, that was really the instigator of the Ontario Association. So if I go back to the Rideau Rebels, they toured Toronto and they really saw the excitement for a kind of a provincial tournament. And to organize that tournament, the Ontario Hockey Association was set up. But one of their roles was to make sure that the game remained for amateurs. Well, there's a good story here. This is the Berlin hockey team in the late 1800s. And Berlin is now called Kitchener, but this club or hockey club played their arch rival Waterloo in a game in, I think it was 1897. And Berlin beat Waterloo, and their manager, this fellow in the front in the coat, he was the manager, and he's also the mayor of Berlin. He ran onto the ice. He presented everyone on the team a $10 gold coin. The Ontario Hockey Association heard about this and said, well, this is not amateurs, they're now professionals. So the team was suspended for the rest of the year, and then they had to appeal. So this is now there's a couple of key people on this team. This fellow in the back row here is John Gibson, or Jack Gibson. We'll hear about him in a little while. And this fellow in the front row, his name is Art Farrell. He was from Montreal that played on this team. And he actually wrote one of the first books on how to play hockey. So these were very powerful organizations and had great power. And when you read the Houghton book, you'll see that it influenced a number of the player movement and a number of things that took place in Canada, but always maintaining that it would be a game for the amateurs. In the United States, it took a little different route. Roller skating was very popular in the United States in this 1880s. And there were roller polo leagues. And then in many parts of the United States, ice polo became popular. The different set of rules than hockey, but you basically, they would be on smaller ice surfaces. There were a number of different rules, but this is very popular. Ice polo was very popular in the Upper Peninsula in those years. There were leagues and really ice hockey really kind of evolved out of it. And really in the United States, what happened was there was some men's ice polo teams in New York and Pittsburgh and some of the border towns. And then some Canadian teams would come down and play them. And often they'd play one game of ice polo and one game of ice hockey. And quickly, ice hockey overtook ice polo, and ice polo just about disappeared. So in the Copper Country, the first ice hockey teams were organized by a Canadian, this fella in Dollar Bay, a small community just outside Houghton. And there were several Canadians that worked at the Hancock chemical plant that made explosives for the mining industry. And these Canadians had learned the game in Canada and brought that excitement to the Copper Country. Ice polo was still popular, but a couple of key dates here in December of 1897, Yates had brought his Canadians together. He showed a few of the locals how to play this game of ice hockey, and they wanted to play an exhibition game at an outdoor rink in Calumet. The newspaper said the game made a favorable impression and it is likely that a team would be organized by local skaters. This is what they want to do, is elevate this game of hockey. Well, just a week later, teams played at an ice rink in Ripley, just outside of Hancock. The game is somewhat similar to polo, but not nearly as exciting, and it is feared that very little interest will be taken. Well, they were wrong. Hockey has been a mainstay of the Copper Country ever since. And really by the fall of 1898, the quotes from the papers are, "Hockey will be the fashion. If you want to keep up with the times, play hockey." And so things really got exciting in the Copper Country. But it really grew when Doc Gibson arrived. Now, Doc Gibson, that was the fellow from the Berlin hockey team. He was born in Berlin, outstanding athlete in several sports, but he was suspended. He actually attended the Detroit College of Medicine, which is now Wayne State, and graduated in dentistry. And while he was at the Detroit College of Medicine, he played on their football team. He was captain of the football team. He was actually on their hockey team. So they actually had a hockey team at Detroit College of Medicine at the time. And apparently that team traveled to the Copper Country in 1899 or so, just to play an exhibition game against the local team. Well, so he graduated. He moved to Houghton because at 1900, this was the boom area of the country with the copper mining, and he joined a local hockey team. So this is Gibson in the front row here, and all the other players are local players. So Gibson was the star of the team. He showed them how to a lot of the improve in team play. He became quite a spokesman for hockey and advocated his enthusiasm for the game and so on. He actually was involved in helping train some Michigan College of Mines students how to play hockey. So quite a fascinating individual. At the time, he really about only 21 or so. Well, that team won the UP championship. They beat a team from Sioux, Michigan, and claimed the UP championship. Now, the next year, Gibson brought a couple more friends. He talked them into spending the winter in Houghton, and they had a very good team. So this would be the 1901-1902 team. They won the Upper Peninsula Championship again, and then they beat a team from Chicago to claim the championship of the Western United States. So this is just a poster here to outline those games. And you see the game will undoubtedly be the finest game ever played in the West. The winner of this game played the winner of the East, which was a team from Pittsburgh. They ended up tied, so they never really determined who the US champion was that year. It's about this time that Gibson and D must have met at some social event. And remember, the upper class were still involved in hockey. They must have met at a social event. The teams were playing, the first few years, they were playing at the Palace Ice Rink in Ripley, and it had capacity for about 1,000. Well, more people wanted to see this Portage Lake team, and they couldn't get into the game. So D and Gibson really were convinced that if we built a new arena, hockey would grow even faster in the Copper Country. So D formed a warehouse team or warehouse company to build a new arena. And the new arena was the Amphitryon. It was built on the Houghton waterfront. This photo that's often shown is actually one of 1907 photo. They added this facade on the front. It was an armory and a ballroom, but it had a movie set. It was just kind of a fake front on it. It makes it look like it's a brick front, but it was just like a movie set. Very, very grandiose looking. It had seating for 2,500 plus 6,000 standees. It was built in the fall of 1902 and at a cost of $16,000. It was actually built in about 6 weeks. So a wooden structure. the first game played at the Amphidrome was the end of December 1902. Portage Lake played a team from the University of Toronto. So this is kind of the 1902-1903 team of Portage Lake. Gibson recruited a few more of his friends from Canada to join him, spend the winter with me in Houghton. And so the game ended up, Portage Lake won 13-2. And University of Toronto were students of they were competing against McGill and some of the other top team university league that formed in Canada at the time. So this was a pretty impressive team. Now, this fellow on the front row, well, you've probably picked out Gibson already. This is Gibson. At the other end of the first row here, of the seated row, is a fellow named Dutch Menti. He's also from Berlin. He must have been a pretty good player. He scored 8 goals in that of the 13 that Portage Lake scored that night. The team went undefeated that year, and they beat Pittsburgh for the U.S. championship. So this is the U.S. champion of 1903. Well, Gibson and Dee started to realize, we could actually get a better team and play even better teams. And so they went back to Canada, or recruited a bunch of Canadians. And to get them to spend the winter in Houghton, they said, we will actually openly pay you to play hockey if you come to Houghton. And so this was the difference. There was always, when amateurs, there was, in Canada, concern over being amateurs. So teams didn't want to let on they were paying anybody. There may have been under the table payments, but they were always very secretive, because if you found that your team was being paid, you were no longer amateur, and you were no longer eligible for the Stanley Cup. So there's a lot of under the table payments that took place, but Gibson and Dee said, we will openly pay you to play hockey if you come and spend your winter in Houghton. Now, you've probably picked out, Gibson is in the front, middle of the seated here, and this is Dee right here. This is Dee. These two gentlemen here are the Stewart brothers. They're one of the top players of that era. Everyone in here, all the players except for one, are from Canada. The one lone player here is Joe Linder. He was a high school player in Hancock, Michigan, and Gibson was quite impressed. He ended up being kind of a spare. He only played 2 or 3 games, but he was there on photo day. Joe Linder went on and helped develop hockey in Duluth area, and is actually in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. So I just completed a story, and I just got a note yesterday that it had been accepted for the UP Reader. So you can read more about Joe Linder in the next edition of the UP Reader. So this team won 24 games and lost 2, and then they started to wear the green and white of the time. So they won the U.S. championship again. There was talk by many, well, the rules are kind of changing a little bit for Stanley Cup. Maybe we could challenge for the Stanley Cup. Well, before they could get in a challenge for the Stanley Cup, a team from Montreal challenged Portage Lake. The team from Montreal, they were one of the top teams in Canada. They called themselves the champions of Canada. The Portage Lake team was the U.S. champion. So Portage Lake accepted the challenge, and it was to be played at the Amphidrome on 2 days in March for what was billed as the World's Championship. And in the book, you'll see a copy of this. You can read all the fine print and special rates on the streetcars, special rates on the trains to get to it, all kinds of different specials to bring the people to the game. Now, the Portage Lake won the first game, 8-4, and they won the second game, 9-2. So they are really the world's champion in 1904. Well, in the summer of 1904, Dee promoted the idea of a professional hockey league he convinced several entrepreneurs that you could actually make money playing hockey. If you charge, you can make some money. And so the initial plans were to form a hockey league. He invited several entrepreneurs. There were some interest from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Chicago, St. Louis, were all expressed some interest. But when it got down to it, they were going to call it the American Hockey Association. But the Sioux Canada said they'd like to join. And so at in late November, Sioux Canada said we'd like to join. So it became the International Hockey League, the IHL. It was really the first professional hockey league. And these are the 5 teams that were in that league: Portage Lake or Houghton, Calumet, Sioux, Michigan, Sioux Canada, and Pittsburgh. In the book, we give you a little background, but I might just share with you now, is Portage Lake, Houghton had a population of about 4,000 in 1904. Hancock, it was about 6,000. So about 10,000 lived in the Houghton-Hancock area. The Calumet area was about 35,000. A lot larger than it is today. Sioux, Michigan at the time was about 11,000. Sioux Canada was about 6,000. And Pittsburgh was over 300,000. So and all players were openly paid to play hockey. And virtually all the players were from Canada. These are the sweaters of the 5 teams. You can probably pick them out. Portage Lake in the green and white, Calumet in the gray with the red trim. The Sioux, Michigan is the purple. The red and white is Sioux Canada, and Pittsburgh is the purple. Now, Calumet played in the new Palestra. So they built an arena for the Calumet team. It had seating for about 3,000. It's located in Lorien, near the Copper Range Railroad. Just ran right by the arena here. Here's the arena, Copper Range Railroad here. So it was easy to get from Houghton up to the Calumet net to the game, and the streetcar was just a few blocks away. Today it's in the area of the Gip Arena, if you're familiar with Calumet or with Lorien. And the first game was played in the middle of December 1904. Now the Sioux, Michigan, because it's the UP group, I thought, well, the Portage Lake played at the Amphitryon. The Sioux, Michigan played in the Ridge Street Ice-Atorium. And this is the Ice-Atorium here. This is the Canal Park, so you can see the Sioux Lock here. And this is the Iroquois Hotel. It burned down shortly after this photo was taken. But that's where they played now it was a converted curling rink that had some posts in the middle. So there were some restricted sight lines and some challenges playing in a curling rink with posts down the middle of the ice. The Calumet surprised everybody. They were the league's first champion. And the most famous person in here is this gentleman right in the back. His name is Hod Stewart. He was the manager of the Palestra. He was the captain. He was the star. He was everything for the Calumet team. An outstanding player. We could probably spend a half hour talking about him. You're just going to have to buy the book to read more about him. But he had ended up there for a couple of years. He returned to Canada, and he was killed died in a young age in a diving accident. Anyways, this is Hod Stewart, and there are a few others that are in the Hockey Hall of Fame. This in the second year of the league. This is the Portage Lake team won it. And I'm just going to note a couple of players in here that you want to read more about or maybe have heard about. One is Fred Taylor. He became known as Cyclone Taylor when he returned to Canada after his days in playing in the league. He was the highest paid athlete at the time. Many have probably heard about Wayne Gretzky. He was the Wayne Gretzky of that era. The other person over here is Joe Hall. He was the leading scorer that year, but he also led the league in penalty minutes. His nickname was Bad. He played just 1 year and then went to Canada and had a long career in Canada. A couple of side stories on Joe Hall here. You can read them in the book, but Joe Hall ended up playing for the Montreal Canadiens against the Seattle Metropolitans in the 1919 Stanley Cup Finals. Now, everybody probably remembers what happened in 1919 during the Stanley Cup Finals. They were never completed because of the Spanish flu epidemic in Seattle. Several players died. Joe Hall died. And there's a few other stories you can read about Joe Hall and in the book as how he got his name Bad. So he was a rugged player, but those are two I just point out in that, and there's more stories on some of these players in the book. Now, Portage Lake won. Well, maybe I should back up here first and just tell you what the salaries were. The salaries, they say they were openly paid. Each player was negotiating his salary, and so on an average, it was about $50 a game that they would make to play. Better players would make a little more, so they would typically make. An average player would make $1,000 to $1,200 for the season of 24 games. And better players would make more, like Cyclone Taylor or Fred Taylor. He was making probably $3,000, $4,000 a year to play. When he returned to Canada a couple of years later, he was making $6,000 and $7,000 a year to play. To give you some idea, an average minor at the time was making probably $400 to $600 a year, working a 60-hour week. So these players were fairly well paid at the time for the amount of work. And when they came to the Copper Country, it was just to play hockey. Some of them got some side jobs working in the stores or something, but they just basically returned to Canada in the summers. Portage Lake also won the championship in the third season of the league too. So now the league itself, there was talk of expansion after every season. There was the cities or towns that were mentioned. Well, they explored was Duluth, Minnesota. Marquette even talked about maybe a joining the league. New York City, St. Louis, Minneapolis talked about, and St. Paul all talked about joining the league, but they never did. The league operated for 3 seasons. They were being, several professional leagues started to realize, oh, we could make some money in Canada playing hockey. And several leagues formed. So they were paying more money to come back to Canada. And also they could sell the idea, well, you'd be able to play for the Stanley Cup. These are the National Hockey Association was primarily in the Montreal, Quebec City, Ottawa area. Ontario Professional League was in Toronto, Waterloo area. And the Pacific Coast League was, you can kind of guess it, out on the West Coast with Victoria and Vancouver. And there were some others too. Now, there are several famous players that played in the league. There are actually almost 100 players that played in the league over that 3 years. Some only played a few games, but these are a few of the famous players, and there's many more that I've summarized in the Houghton book. 12 of the players that played in the league are actually in the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. I think just about everyone except Bill Taylor here are in the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. Bill Taylor has a good story. He played in Sault Ste. Marie, and some good stories about him. I think he was charged with murder of his wife. So there's a story about him. So we piqued your interest. Now, the CBC a few years ago, they did a documentary series, Hockey: A People's History, and one of the episodes is of what the episode 2 is of the money game, and that talks about the Fred Taylor and his pursuit or role to get into the Copper Country and that league. So it's about a half hour. You can find it on YouTube if you just YouTube episode 2, the money game. You can view the story. It actually plays continuously at the D Stadium in Houghton. Now we'll get you back to Stanley Cup. In 1908, a new trophy was introduced for the best amateur team in Canada. Remember, the Stanley Cup originally was for the best amateur team in Canada. Well, it was replaced by the Allen Cup. This is, and then rules started to change to allow professional teams to challenge for the Stanley Cup. So it wasn't just for the best amateur team. We could have some, initially said, well, you had to declare which players were professional on your team or which ones you're paying, which ones are amateur. And basically it became all professional teams. This is a Stanley version of the Stanley Cup of that era. It remained as a challenge trophy until 1914, and then 1915 it became a competition trophy between the winners of the National Hockey Association and the Pacific Coast Hockey Association, and that started in 1915. So I probably should leave you with a trivia question now that you can impress your friends. Who was the first U.S. team to play in the Stanley Cup Finals? And the hint, it was in 1916, and the team from the National Hockey Association was the Montreal Canadiens. Well, everybody's running through what were the teams in the Pacific Coast League at the time? Did anybody guess that it was the Portland Rosebuds? It was the Portland Rosebuds that were the first U.S. team to play for the Stanley Cup. And a couple of years later, a U.S. team won the Stanley Cup. Well, they beat the Montreal Canadiens in 1917. Well, it wasn't the Rosebuds, it was the Seattle Metropolitans. So that's kind of exciting now when the new Seattle franchises return to the National Hockey League. So there's a couple of trivia questions you can test your friends on. Now, the Stanley Cup, or the National Hockey Association, became the National Hockey League in 1917. They basically disbanded the National Hockey Association because they didn't like the owner of the Toronto franchise. So they got rid of him and then reformed the National Hockey League. The Pacific Coast League folded, went out of business, so the Stanley Cup became the famous trophy in 1927. And this is a look at what the trophy looked like in 1927, the stovepipe look for the Stanley Cup. Well, yeah, many people talk about the original 6. Well, that's something different in the National Hockey League. When the National Hockey League was founded in 1917, there were 5 franchises that were granted. I mentioned the Toronto franchise. They didn't like the owner of the previous one, so somebody else stepped up, and it was for the Toronto team. The Montreal Canadiens and the Montreal Wanderers. The Montreal Wanderers started the season, but within a few weeks of the start of the season, their arena burnt down, so they didn't finish the season. The Quebec Bulldogs were granted a franchise, but they decided to postpone joining the league. So in 1917, the National Hockey League ended with 3 teams: the Montreal Canadiens, the Montreal Wanderers, and the Toronto Arenas. And tying it back in, the Montreal Canadiens won the first season. They played Seattle Metropolitans for the Stanley Cup and were beaten by the Metropolitans. Now, the National Hockey League expanded to the United States in the early 1920s. The earliest teams were Boston and the New York Americans. There were several teams added and folded. The Detroit Cougars joined in 1926. They used to be the Victoria Cougars of the Pacific Coast League. They became the Falcons and then became the Red Wings. So the original, in 1942, at the end of the 1942 season, a St. Louis team folded, and so there are only 6 teams left. And so what many talk about, the original 6 of the National Hockey League were the 6 teams in the NHL between 42 and 1967. And in 1967, they added 6 more teams. So there are 12 teams for a number of years. And today there are 32 teams. So the Stanley Cup today is looks a little different than the original ones, but it is a very unique trophy. It has the names of the players that are on each team. And there's a process of how many rings they can have on the trophy and so on, but it is a pretty special trophy. Well, after the professional leagues left the Copper Country, amateur hockey really still flourished in the Copper Country. There are many teams and many leagues. Some of the best amateur teams, the best high school teams were in the Copper Country in that era. The 1913 Portage Lake team was the U.S. Senior Amateur Champion. This is a look at that team. And they won the championship. There was no trophy at the time. So in December of 1913, James McNaughton donated a trophy for the best amateur team in the United States. At the time, McNaughton was the superintendent and general manager of the Calumet and Hecla company in Calumet. Now, to tie in a few other things, the Coliseum opened in 1913. Now the news of McNaughton's donation for the trophy and the opening of the Coliseum was really not covered much, because everybody in this audience knows what else happened on Christmas Eve of 1913, the Italian Hall disaster. So it didn't have the coverage at the time. You can see that the first skating and dancing was to take place at the Coliseum late December. A couple of years ago, this Calumet was named Hockeyville in the United States in the exhibition game, but the Calumet Coliseum is the oldest continually operating ice arena in the world. It is still, they've had hockey at this arena every year since it opened in 1913. To tie in the rest of the story here, the Palestra in Lorium, because of the Coliseum being built closer to, say, downtown Red Jacket or Calumet, the Palestra in Lorium kind of fell in disuse. So some investors from Marquette bought the Palestra, took it all apart and moved it to Marquette and rebuilt it in Marquette, and it opened in 1922. It's on Fair Street, just west of the Barrie Event Center is where it was located. Many veterans remember playing in the Palestra. The original Amphitrome was destroyed in a fire in 1927, and it was rebuilt through the efforts of Dee and called the new Amphitrome. And then the Michigan Tech bought the new Amphitrome in 1942 and renamed it Dee Stadium. This is a photo of it when it was the new Amphitrome. Well, we better tie in a little bit about Michigan Tech, hockey at Michigan Tech. I mentioned Gibson helped with a few players in the early 1901 in instructing the game. But the first official, I called it official team at Michigan Tech was fall of 1920. The student council at the time had formed, and one of their tasks was we should have an official varsity hockey team. And so they asked the fella in the back here to be the manager of that team. And so he went out and he got some ice time for practice and games at the Amphidrome. He went out and canvassed the business community in Houghton to buy uniforms and equipment for the team. The fellow's name was Endicott Lovell. He was a little older. He actually was on student council too. He was a little older, but the interesting thing, he's the son-in-law of James McNaughton. So in the book, you'll read later what happened on some of these things after. when the McNaughton Cup was turned over to the Western Collegiate Hockey Association, they had to go to Endicott Lovell, who became president of the Calumet and Hecla Mining Company, to get their approval. The first game for the Michigan College of Mines was held, our first college game was played against the University of Michigan. And you can see at the Amphidrome on Thursday, January the 27th, a little over 100 years ago. And at the time, what was always the rules of the time is that the game said it would start at 8 and they'd have a definite time that they end. And quite often what they would do to attract a larger group of fans, they would have dancing after it. So you can see here, this is one of those games that had dancing. So unescorted ladies, if they came after the game, they could get in for a little less. Now, the Michigan College of Mines beat Michigan that night. They beat them 3-0. The next night, the two teams played at the Coliseum in Calumet. Michigan beat the Michigan College of Mines 4-3 the next night. And the reason they played in Calumet, there were several players on the Calumet team several players on the Michigan team from Calumet. The next weekend, they played Notre Dame. The first game was played at the Amphidrome. Michigan College of Mines won 7-2. The second game was played at the Coliseum. Notre Dame won 3-2. The reason they did that, there were several players from the Copper Country, from Calumet area, played on the Notre Dame team. So it's really over 20 years, 100 years that the Michigan Tech hockey team has been playing. Just jot down a couple things. They've been to the NCAA tournament 13 times. There's been over 800 players that have played for the Huskies in that time. More than 50 have played in the NHL. 3 former Huskies have been head coaches in the NHL, and 3 former Huskies have played on the Stanley Cup championship team. So kind of brings things together. So my next project after the Houghton book was one on Michigan Tech. I was asked if I found my way around the archives, if I could put something together for Michigan Tech, and this just came out this week. So it's kind of a look at 100 years of memories of Michigan Tech hockey. Victor is a Michigan Tech alum, and he probably, to start it, we were talking about sharing your memories. And really what we try to do is that Tech hockey has created memories for teams, for players, for fans. And I'm just trying to capture some of those with a lot of stats and who won what and all this in a book. So it was released this week. So lots of Tech memories over those 100 years. That's ready for a whole new presentation in the future about Michigan Tech hockey. I was telling Victor, I've even included a couple of pages so you can write the last two or three pages of the book yourself and include your memories. So tonight I just focused on as the background to the sign as you come into Houghton, the birthplace of professional hockey. Now, I guess I should, just to finish it off, is where can you get these books? The Houghton book was primarily sold in the local Copper Country area. There are books available at Snowbound in Marquette, but in the Houghton area, the main bookstores, Copper World, Grandpa's Barn, I found Michigan Tech, Northwind's books in part of Finlandia. Probably the easiest place to get the Houghton book is through the Michigan Tech bookstore. They'll send it to you. Just go on their website, and they handle all the sales tax and the mailing. So the Michigan Tech book, your best place to get it right now would be through the Michigan Tech bookstore. You can get it online. In the next few weeks, it'll be out into some of the local bookstores. So, and then just a process set up that who knows where it's going to go. But really now, it was kind of developed as a benefit book for the hockey program. So all the proceeds go back to the Michigan Tech hockey program. So my time was free, and I paid. I actually have one of the editors on the call here. Brandy took a first look at it. You may not recognize it, Brandy, but you took a look at it and provide some input along the way. And I did lined up a whole bunch of things, and I just turned it over to them. So they're doing, the Michigan Tech Athletic Department is doing all of the marketing and distribution for that book. So we've actually also discovered some good places to sell books. Michigan Made has been a good one. You just don't sell them at bookstores. You find, oh, there's other places that unsuspecting buyers come in and will buy it. And a couple of grocery stores at Houghton were a good spot too. So it's, anyways, those are the two books. Thank you. It's kind of a good story to tell. You almost have to buy the book now to get more on these two stories. I guess that's what you're supposed to do is in these talks is get everybody excited to buy your book. So there may be some questions that come up. I'll see if I can handle them.
Does anybody have any questions?
Bill, can you talk about how the rules evolved from that simple one-pager to more complex?
Sure,
nuanced?
sure. I took those slides out, but basically the rules that were used in the International Hockey League are what the Quebec rules. There were Montreal rules, there were Ontario Hockey League rules. There were a number of different rules at the time, but some of the basic rules that were used in the International Hockey League, there were 7 players on the ice. There was a goalie, a point, and cover point. We would call those defensemen now. At that time, they'd play one defenseman in front of the other. We usually defensemen side by side. There were 3 forwards, the center, the left wing, and the right wing. And then there was a rover. Your defenseman would just stay in the one end. Your forwards would just stay in the other end, and the rover would go anywhere he wanted to. That was usually your best player. They played 60-minute games, 2 30-minute halves, running time with a 10-minute break. So everything was going to be over in an hour and 10 minutes. So that's where you could schedule the dance, the band, and everything. There were no substitutions. The players played the entire game. So that's why you'll see the photos with so few players in it. And I mentioned Joe Linder. He was there for photo day. He sat on the bench for 2 or 3 games because they didn't need him. But he was there just in case. Because when a player was injured, the other team would be required to, by gentleman's agreement, to drop a player or okay a substitute to come and play in his place. There were no lines on the ice. There were no forward passes allowed. So you advance the puck by skating and stick handling and use a drop or a back pass. So you would skate, say, behind the net, then you would, the Gretzky maneuver, take out space behind the net and then pass it in front. The wingers would stay behind the puck carrier. The referee set a bell. The length of the penalties would be decided by the referee, anywhere from 1 minute to 2 minutes to 5 minutes. The goalies must maintain a standing position. There's no sitting, lying, or kneeling. And if they did, they were given a penalty. And so those are some of the rules. The the rover disappeared with some of these new leagues, and the National Hockey Association got rid of the rovers. They could save some money by not having to pay that player. Then they went to the 3 20-minute periods because the ice was getting pretty worn out with the 2 halves. So, and the rules keep evolving, but those are some of the basic ones at the time, and we've included some of the details in the book too. So you can look at the technical interpretation of it all, but those are some of the basic things at the time. So good question, Victor.
Well, I know I'm going to buy a copy of that new book tomorrow for our library. And does anyone else have any other questions before we sign off till next month? Okay. Well,
yeah, I have. Well, hang on, Evelyn. I've got one question real quick. Just watching, what he's covered so far. There's some very interesting things. The first one, we were just talking about the back passes and stuff like that. That sounds very similar to either rugby or soccer. Is that where they generated these rules from?
A lot of the rules that originally were evolved out of field hockey games. And the other one that seems to be lacrosse was one of the ones that they're kind of, but a lot of suggested that the rules that Creighton developed were just kind of field hockey converted to ice. Now, ice polo was quite different. The ice polo or roller polo, you would place the ball in the middle. And everybody would charge from the 2 ends, and who was there first would get possession of the ball. So that, and then other things happened after that. So,
hence the reason the pads showed up.
Yes. The other thing that's kind of interesting I didn't mention is the initial part of hockey. The referee used to hold his hand over the puck and would raise his hand when it was time to play. He realized that it was probably a good idea to drop the puck.
No kidding. And the last part of that, with the barns, the ancient barns, basically the 1906 barns and stuff like that, were they open barns? Because I can't imagine they had refrigeration units to keep that ice cold.
No, everyone was enclosed. Was an enclosed barn, and they all had natural ice. So the season basically started in the middle of December and went to about the middle of March. The arena in Pittsburgh was one of 2 artificial ice surfaces in the United States. The other one was in New York City at the time. So the arena that was used in Pittsburgh, the Duquesne Gardens, it had artificial ice. So they would schedule a lot of the early season games in Pittsburgh. So good question. Good question. You've probably been to some of those cold arenas, and you always wondered about them, did you, Chris?
Oh, definitely. My kids have been in it for 12 years, and they play college hockey, and it's like, this is really interesting to hear. So thank you very much for being here.
I think what many, there are a number of teams from Southeast Michigan that venture up into D Stadium and the Coliseum now are just amazed by those 2 arenas. And the 2 places have a lot of photos, a lot of history, but the high school teams from the Southeast Michigan just enjoy that trip so much. It's just kind of a step back in time.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Thank you very much for being here tonight, too.
anyone else? Questions? Oh, sure. Ask your question, Mom.
What is his name?
Chris?
Chris, behind you, what is that picture, or is it a picture?
I think I have a photo of, you're asking Chris.
You see that? It looks like maybe a hockey goalie or something.
He's on the end of the rink at the time, and
Okay.
Yeah.
there's the trick of Zoom background, I think.
Exactly. That's what it was. I went looking on the internet for a hockey background, and this is what came up for Zoom. And it's like, that's perfect. I grew up in Montana, so I get the mountains and everything else in the background. That's awesome.
extra credit for you, Chris. You
Well,
brought a good background to Wade tonight.
Thank you very much. And at that point, I'm going to ask for Mr. Sproule to send me a signed copy of his book.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone where do you live, Chris?
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Oh, okay. I'll send you a copy.
Yeah.
My email was on the first slide, wsproule@mtu.edu. So if you send me where to send it, I'll.
All right. I can do that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
It's going to cost you $20 though.
Hey, what I got to do, I got to do, you know?
It'll be signed. and since it's a UP notable book, it now has a UP notable sticker on it.
You
Yeah.
betcha.
I see Margaret's got the copy and she's got a notable sticker on her book. So
Well, I tell you what,
every book I've signed, every book that's gone out is signed. So
I'll
Is
you
tell
that,
tell me what you want, I'll even personalize it for you.
well,
wanna-
the trolls
is
down
that-
here appreciate it.
Well, I'm actually a troll now myself. We actually moved to the Brighton, Michigan area.
so William, Bill, or whatever you
Bill,
go by,
Bill.
is this your signature?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I never would have figured that.
Well, there's one
Got a
thing.
W in it.
A hockey player, if you ever notice a hockey player, it's always a scroll, just a scribble with a number.
Okay. Well, I did order it out of the Houghton store, so
Good.
Thank-
So one can order them, and the out of Copper World has also been a great spot to buy the book, and they have quite an online presence too. So
Great.
well, I find that it's really disheartening that I couldn't get it through my local library here in Escanaba. And
Oh my gosh.
and then when they tried to put it on hold for me from within the system, I called like last week and it still wasn't there and I wasn't going to be on the list. So I called the bookstore and I thought, okay, I'm going to buy it. I know nothing about what you talked about, but it was so interesting. I am so happy that I listened to it.
well, now
Thank-
you know much more.
I do. And I have a grandson-in-law that played hockey up in Superior State up in Sault Ste. Marie. And
Okay.
so I'm anxious to be able to show him the book and talk to him about it. So thank you.
I spent a couple of years at Lake Superior State and then transferred for the last 2 years at Tech. So my claim to fame there is it became Lake Superior State the first fall I was there. So I was on the cartoonist. So I designed a logo to try a cartoon character to try and generate a logo. So for a number of years, the drunken sailor was the logo until they adopted the anchor.
Oh, well,
That's awesome.
that's great. That's just wonderful.
Oh, well, it was a nice chat tonight, everybody. And for those of you who put on the chat that you need that other book, I'll send it to you. And thank you so much, William. Good luck with the new book. I hope it sells out like your last one did.
Well, we're hoping that every Michigan Tech alum is going to buy, so we're going to have to print more. But we were fortunate. I had somebody underwrite the cost of production of the printing, and I just donated my time and some of the costs, and so it benefits the Michigan Tech hockey program. So
Wonderful. Okay, thank you, everybody. We hope to see you in January, and have a nice holiday season, everyone.
You've been watching the UP Notable Books Club, brought to you by the Upper Peninsula Publisher and Authors Association. To join or for more information, please visit us at www.upa.org or www.upnotable.com.